Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, mgrahamsews. This video tutorial is for this gorgeous bag called the Elpis Handbag, and it's by DEJA Designs. This bag has lots of wonderful features, but before we get discussing them, there's just a few important things I wanted to note. First of all, this tutorial is filmed like a sew-along. That means there's no parts that are cut out, no parts that are sped up. You see everything in real time and I show you how to do everything. Now there are a few parts that I don't show you. So for example, when I'm installing rivets, I go off camera to do that. I also will show you how to sew one handle, and then I'll go off camera and I'll sew the second handle and the strap, because the construction is the same and I don't feel that you need to sit and watch me sew two more. That just makes the tutorial that much longer. I also do the same with the connectors. So if you're using side connectors and the handle connectors, I do the same thing for that as well. And that's just to help with the length of the tutorial, because it can already be long enough. I don't want it to be any longer than it already is. So if there's a part that you're watching and you're just finding it's taking too long, definitely fast forward the video or watch it in a faster speed. Use the tutorial how you see fit and that you feel is best for you. It is here to help guide you through making this bag if you're stuck at any part or anything like that. The other thing I wanted to mention is I don't give any measurements, so there's no rulers, cutting mats, pattern pieces, no seam allowances given, nothing. And this is for the protection of the designer, but also because I film during testing, so oftentimes things like measurements for, say, a magnetic snap may change, and if it does change by the time the pattern is released, this won't affect my tutorial at all. You'll be able to sew right along with me and not have to worry about any changes in the pattern. So you will need to have the pattern either printed beside you or open on another device or open on this device that you're watching this tutorial on, so that you can follow along and know what all the measurements are. So now that I've discussed some of those important things that I wanted to go through, let's discuss some of the features of this bag. So first thing you'll notice is there are handles, and these are handbag handles that just go over your arm like this to carry it like that. The bag also has a crossbody strap here, so it's totally adjustable. The nice thing about crossbody straps is you can wear it on your shoulder, so you have this that's like a shoulder bag, and then you can adjust it to wear it crossbody. So it's kind of like two straps in one. So say you're kind of tired of wearing it crossbody while you're out, you can definitely switch it and then carry it on your shoulder, or vice versa. You're tired of carrying it on your shoulder and you want to go completely hands-free. You have the options to adjust it and go with just the crossbody strap. You can also take this off and just carry it just as a handbag if you want, tuck the strap into your bag, and you're good to go. The other feature of this bag is the front. You'll notice there's this little flap here, and when you open it up, inside you have a slip pocket, and then you close the flap back up and it holds it closed. So this holds it closed. Now there is an option in the pattern for adding a thumb lock or a catch lock, and when you attach the thumb lock, it's the same thing, and then at the end when you're done your bag, you'll add your little thumb lock here so that it can slip into the pocket. Now on the back of the bag you have your zipper pocket here. So you have a place to put like a phone, or if you want to put your wallet in there, or maybe your keys. I just love having all these pockets on this bag. I love bags with lots of pockets because I'm all about keeping things organized. Inside the bag, which is closed with a zipper, so keeps everything nice and secure, and you'll notice the zipper goes from one end to the other. So it is a recessed zipper, but there's no gaps at either end the way the zipper is installed. So with that, once you open the bag, it's quite large inside and extremely roomy. So there's a lot of room in there. This is the large bag, by the way, so it's very roomy. You have a zipper pocket on one side here. So here's the zipper pocket on the one side. And on the other side, we have divided slip pockets. So great for keeping everything organized in your bag. You know, if you don't want something at the bottom of your bag loose, so maybe your medication or something, it's great to have the slip pocket to have it to add and keep everything nice and organized. And the bottom of the bag has this contrast base, and it wraps all the way around. I just love this bag. This bag I made for me because I love a red and black bag, and actually usually red, black, and white too, but I've been wanting to make myself a red and black bag, so I decided this was it. I love the size. It's a great size of the bag I would like to carry. It's a great bag, and it really comes together very easily. A fantastic design. You'll really enjoy making this bag. So let's get started making our Elpis handbag. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is read through the entire pattern. This is very important for a few different reasons. One of them being that oftentimes designers give different information regarding different materials you can use. The other reason is they also give information regarding different interfacings to use. So say you're using a vinyl, there may be a different interfacing you can use. So these are things you'll want to make note of before you begin cutting out your bag. The other reason is it's very important to familiarize yourself with the pattern before you begin so you know how the bag is going to be constructed, and then when you get to a step, you'll already sort of have an idea of what's going on. It's also important because sometimes things are cut a little bit differently. So there's an option for, say, for example, in this pattern, you can do a birthing method or a drop-in lining method. So these are things that you want to make note of before you begin cutting out your materials. Because again, things will be cut differently or done differently based off the method you're choosing. Also in this pattern, there are different options for different hardware. So you'll also want to make note of that so that you can gather the right hardware and make the right choices. Again, this all affects things that you're cutting as well. So once you've decided what materials you're using, what interfacings you're using, what style of bag you're going to be doing, we can get started cutting out all our material. And for this tutorial, I'm using a combination of faux leathers and vinyls and quilting cottons, all for this tutorial. Everything is domestic friendly. You'll see it scrunches up really nicely. And I've also already gathered up all of my hardware, and my zippers are also in this bag as well. I would just like to have it all handy and together so that I don't lose anything. The other thing I've gone ahead and done is I've made marks where there's some marks that need to be made. So for example, on these pieces here, I've drawn the lines down the center. I've made markings on this pattern piece, if you can see it, the white chalk line. And I've also marked where my centers are. So all my center markings are done, and I've marked a T so I know where the top is, and also what the letter is that corresponds with this pattern piece. So this is pattern piece J. So when I get to that step in the pattern, I know what pattern piece I'm looking for because they're all labeled. Another thing I've done is my zipper overlays. I've already cut out that zipper window opening here. So that just helps so that I don't have to go off camera, because I don't show the measurements or anything in the pattern. So that just makes it a little bit easier that I don't have to stop the camera so much. There are times, however, where I'll have to stop the camera, but at least I don't have to stop them quite as much. We can just keep going through. But I do show you everything and walk you through everything that I can without giving away measurements. But so that way there, you're not feeling like you're missing out on anything. So once you have all your interfacing attached, you have all your marks made, you've gathered all your hardware, we're ready to get started on our bag. And as I was mentioning just a little bit ago, you need to decide what method of bag you're using or going to be constructing, sorry. Once you have that decision made, there are some measurements and some marks you need to make if you're doing the drop-in lining method. And for that, you'll have to make some measurements on your side exteriors, your exterior top band, and your interior top band. These measurements are given in the pattern for where to make these marks, so you'll want to refer to the pattern for that. If you haven't already, you'll go ahead and cut out the opening in your zipper overlays. Now, I use a rotary cutter and ruler to cut mine out the same way Andrea instructs in the pattern, because it does give really nice, sharp, clean lines. You can use whatever method you prefer to cut that out, but that's just what I do. So I'm just going to put this back. I kind of put it all in order of how it's going to be used. And then the next thing we're going to do is get started on constructing our handles and connect our side connectors and our handle connectors. So you'll want to grab out those pattern pieces that are used for that. And here they are. It's A and A1. So A1 is the optional one. It's the handle connector. Now, I was going to do that, and that's why I cut these out, but I'm choosing not to instead. I'll still walk you through when we get to that step for how to attach these, but that's what your A1 will look like. You'll have two pieces like this. Again, I'm not going to be doing that. I've changed my mind since I've cut this all out, but I will show you what you need to do. So with the handle connectors, all of them, they're all going to be done the same way. So we'll need some double-sided tape. You can also use glue for this if you want. Now, with glue, you will need to allow it to dry before you start stitching because it will gum up your needle. And what you do with the double-sided tape is you place it all the way down So we've drawn a line down the center, as I mentioned earlier. So you're going to take your ruler and draw a line in the center down the entire length of the connector. And then we're going to add double-sided tape on both sides of the line. Just like that. Oops, stuck to my finger. Remove the paper backing from the double-sided tape, and then take your long edge and bring it in to meet at the center line. Once you have that done, we'll then top stitch down the long edges here that we just folded over, so these two long edges, all the way down them. Trim your threads. And that's how it'll look when you've top stitched it. It's hard to see with my hand in the background. There you go. So you'll have that one that looks like that. I'm going to go off camera and do the other one, but I'll continue showing you what you need to do. Now you need to take your hardware. So it'll be D-rings for this. So if you're doing the handle connectors, you will have these ×4 and you'll sew them the same way we just did this one, but you'll be attaching a rectangle ring. I had to think of the word. You'll be attaching a rectangle ring. You'll slide the rectangle ring through the connector just like that, and then you'll fold it so the short edges meet. Once the short edges meet, you'll then baste across the short edges. Whoops. Next, for the side connectors, double-sided tape again down the entire length of the strap, or the connector, sorry. And I left it there. Again, folding them in to meet in the center. Just like that. Then we're going to stitch this using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So I've trimmed all my threads, and that's how that one looks when you've stitched it down the entire length using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Now we're going to take our D-ring and we're going to slide it through the connector. Then we'll take a piece of double-sided tape and you're going to place it on the bottom half of the connector. So on the bottom half here. And if you still see some threads like I'm seeing right now, go ahead and trim them again. Just make sure that they're not there. We don't want peekaboo threads later. Oops. So on the bottom half of the connector, we'll add some tape, some double-sided tape. Thread your connector through, just like that. Then remove the paper backing and you'll fold the side connector in half, but fold it so that the raw edges meet somewhere in the lower end of the connector. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So see here, when I fold this, here's where that raw edge is, and I fold it down. It's in the lower end. You don't want them meeting right in the middle. You want it to be like this so that when we go to attach it to the side of the bag, when we stitch, it'll be caught in our stitching. And if your double-sided tape is not strong enough to hold your connector in place for now, add some clips just like that to the side edges like I did. Then we're going to place another piece of double-sided tape here. So you're placing it over the section where the raw edges meet. Just like that. Do not remove the paper backing just yet. You just want it to be like that. And mine actually starts up a little bit as I make a little tab so that it's easier to pull it off. So that's how that'll look. Now I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to sew the other connector like this, and then I will come back and we will go on to making our handles and our adjustable strap. All right, so I finished both those connectors, and if you're making the connectors for the handles, you'll want to also have those completed the way I showed you, so attaching them. And I realized when I was doing this on camera, I accidentally grabbed the wrong size when I was showing you how to make the A1 connectors. So here it is. That's how it'll look. You'll have it with your hardware folded in half, and the hardware will be in the middle here, and you'll stitch along that bottom, but you'll want to complete that for 4. You'll need 4 of these, but 2 for the side connectors, and those are the ones that are folded like this. So now that those are complete, we're going to put those to the side and move on to making our handle and our adjustable strap. We're going to do one handle right now, and then I will go off camera and I will do the other handle and then fold and sew my adjustable strap, but I will come back and show you how to attach all the hardware, because they're all folded and sewn the same way, so I don't really need to have you sit and watch me do all 3 of them. So first thing that Andrea mentions is that if your handles are going to be fixed to the bag, so you're not using the hardware, it's advisable to reinforce the handles to make sure they stand up well. So I'm going to use some of this reinforcement tape here that I have, and I'm just going to peel it back. And I'm going to place it to one side of the line. So I've drawn a line down the entire length of my strap, just like we did for the side connectors, down the entire length of the, well, this is the handle, not the strap. So there's a middle line down the entire length, and I'll show you on this one because it'll be easier to see. So I've drawn that line down the entire length of the handle. I've also done that for my strap. And now we're going to place double-sided tape on both sides of the line. If you have a thicker double-sided tape, you can definitely use that instead and just go right down the center line. However, I don't right now, I'm out. But we'll probably hear my doorbell while we're filming this tutorial because I am expecting it to be delivered today. Yay! So for the handles and straps, it's a little bit different than when we made the connectors, and that is that we're not going to fold it right in to touch that center line. We're actually going to fold it so it's just a little bit away from the center line. So about 1/16 of an inch away from your center line. You just want that little gap so that when we fold the handle in half again, you don't have all that bulk in that center fold here, and it'll actually make a nicer handle. So press it down. Now, if you don't have double-sided tape, you can use glue here. If you're using quilting cotton, you can just take this right to your iron and press it in place. Now, same thing on this side. Don't fold it right in to meet that center line. Leave it a little bit away. And I might have to adjust the other side just a smidge. Yeah. I need to adjust this side just a smidge. I don't want the gap to be as big as I was making it. Just want a little gap, enough so that the two pieces have room when they fold, the two halves. So I'll show you what I mean. So you see how mine doesn't touch completely in the center? That's what you want. Then you'll take this and fold it all in half again. And I'm just using clips. However, you can use some double-sided tape, which, you know what? I will use that. Because double-sided tape will ensure that nothing shifts on me while I'm sewing. Oops. If you are doing the handles with the connectors, you will want to add your hardware to the ends of these as well. So when you're stitching on the ends, you'll definitely want to make sure you trim all your threads. You're going to be adding hardware to the end of them. But I do have a tutorial on my YouTube channel for how to make nicer finished handles and straps. The only problem with that is the way I do it, you will be needing to cut your handle that little bit longer. It'll make sense when you watch that little video, if that's what you're choosing to do. Just because of the way you're turning the handle, you're going to lose some of that length, unless you're okay losing a little bit of length. So now we have it folded. So again, I'm doing the handles that are fixed to the bag. So now I'm going to stitch all the way down both long edges of the strap, or the handle, sorry. I'm adjusting my stitch length. And I'm using a Teflon foot here. So there's one side. Now I'm going to stitch down the other side. Trim all your threads, and as I was saying, if you're doing the one with the strap connectors, you'll want to make sure you really trim all those threads really well so that they don't poke out your strap end hardware later. If you miss a few right now, if you're doing the fixed handles, it's not so bad because they're going to be attached inside the bag, but I do like trimming them just to make sure that we get no peekaboo threads. So that's how that looks once it's stitched. And I've decided to use black thread, and I really like how it looks, how it's so contrasting. I love it. So I'm going to go off. I'm going to sew my remaining handle and my crossbody strap, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how we attach the hardware to the crossbody strap. If you're adding strap ends to your adjustable strap, you'll also want to add those. And if you're adding strap ends to your handle because you're using the handle connectors, you'll want to do that as well. So I'm going to go off camera, sew everything, and I'll come back and show you how to attach the hardware to make the adjustable strap. All right, so I've gotten my strap and handles all folded and sewn. So now this is the crossbody strap. Here are my two handles. That's what they look like. If you're using the handle connectors, again, don't forget to add your strap ends. And I've added my strap ends to the ends of my adjustable strap because that's what I want on the end of this strap. Again, I'll post that tutorial that I have for getting nice, clean, finished edges if you don't have the hardware and you just don't want to use it. You can use that as an option too to have nice, clean, finished edges on your crossbody strap here. So you'll want to follow your manufacturer's instructions for installing your strap ends. Once you have your strap ends on, you'll need to place or punch some holes to add your rivets. Now, if you don't have rivets or Chicago screws, still make the marks across at those two marks that are given in the pattern, and it depends on if you're using hardware or not hardware where these measurements will be, so you'll want to pay attention to that The measurements are given in the pattern, but just pay attention to where the measurements need to be placed if you're using hardware or no hardware. So if you're not using hardware, again, still make those marks, because what you can do is sew across at that line and then sew a little box with an X in it, and that'll just help reinforce it. So once you have the first 2 holes made for your rivets, what we're going to do is thread our adjustable slider through the strap. Now I'm using a wide mouth one here because I've made my strap out of all vinyl, so it is a bit thicker, so I need to use one of these bigger sliders just to account for the thickness of the strap. So I'm just weaving it over the center bar just like this. So you'll see that it goes over the center bar. And then I'm going to line up those holes I made for the rivets. And I'm going to add a rivet to my strap. Now, the length of the post of the rivet will be dependent on the material you're using. You want the post to just stick out the material. If it doesn't stick out the material that little bit, you're using the wrong size. So there's the first one, and I'm going to actually press this in place. So you're going to get to see me do this on camera, something I normally don't show on camera, but I will do this on camera so that I don't have to stop for this quick one and then go back and come back. So we're going to set the rivet. Now, if you're not using rivets, you can sew directly at that line as I was mentioning, and then make a little box as well if your strap can fit under your machine with the hardware there. So set your rivet just like that. And then what we need to do is grab the other end, and we're going to feed a swivel hook through the other loose end right now. So with my slider, I like it against my table right now. Find the other end of your strap and feed your swivel hook so the swivel hook is against my table. You're going to feed your swivel hook through the strap, just like that. So you see it's on the same side as my slider. And then bring this loose end again up through the adjustable slider and then over that center bar. Again, bringing it down over that center bar. Now, before you attach any other hardware, what you can do is give this a pull, just like that, and see if it is correct. It'll tighten, or it'll stay tightened, and it won't slide on you if you pull on it. Now again, with my slider against the table, swivel hook against the table, I'm going to slide on my hardware. And then we made holes again. So there's marks that you need to use to make holes for your rivets. Now again, if you don't have rivets, make lines at those marks, because you can sew across at those marks, and then you don't have to worry about using rivets. So then after we have the holes marked and punched, we'll attach our rivets. And I have a funny story. When I went off camera to go and sew my strap and attach the strap end hardware, my glue exploded all over me, and I felt like I was back in elementary school when we would take the glue, or maybe I was the only one that did that, and you'd take the glue and you'd put it on your hands and you'd peel it off. That's what happened, but except it wasn't coming off. It was just getting worse and worse, and it was sticking to everything, and there was a big mess. So I had to go and get my nail polish remover, acetone nail polish remover, and had to go and use that in order to get the glue all off my hands, because it was everywhere. The lid of the glue popped off and it just kind of exploded it. So I was trying to put glue in the channel of this hardware here. So I was holding this, and when the lid popped off, I don't know how it came loose, but it popped off and it was all over my hands. It was everywhere. It was such a mess. I thought, oh, I'll just run them under water to get the glue off, but that didn't work at all. So I'm just going to move this over here for now. So that is how they look once your strap is complete. Just like that. And we have all our hardware and everything attached. So we can put this to the side for now, and we're going to move on. Now we're going to create our zipper pockets on our lining and our exterior. So for this, we need to take one of our main linings or your main exterior, whichever one you want to start with. I'm going to start with the lining. And these are done the exact same way for the exterior and the lining. You'll just need to pay attention to the measurement that is given from the top down, because the lining and exterior are not the same measurements for where we're going to place our zipper overlay. So again, if you're starting with your lining, make sure you pay attention to what that measurement is for where this zipper overlay needs to go, because they are different for the exterior and the lining, and they're also different if you're making the small and the large. So I'm making the large, so I have to make sure I follow what the large measurement is. If you haven't already, go ahead and cut out your zipper window here for the zipper overlay. And I'm just going to place my two pockets to the side for a moment. We're going to start with the main lining. And again, you can start with your exterior. It's all the same. It's just a different measurement from the top down. So speaking of that measurement, from the top down, you'll make that measurement and you'll make the mark on your pattern piece. So just like I did here, you can see it here. And you'll want to make a mark where the center is as well. Now, we're going to add some double-sided tape to the back of our overlay. If you want, you can use glue for this. You'll need to place something heavy on top and allow it to dry before you move on though, because it will gum up your needle. So I'm just folding this directly in half so I can line up the center marks on my overlay with the center crease or center mark of the lining. So this mark here that I've made is where the top edge of my overlay will go, and I'll also be placing the overlay centered. That's why I folded it in half, so I can see that. Now I use chalk, so I'm just going to use my cuff to wipe off the chalk because I don't want that showing later. Sometimes I have a damp rag near me and I just wipe it off with the damp cloth. But I find that just rubbing a dry material helps dust that chalk off. There we go. And it does look like it's crooked. It's just because I didn't cut my lining exactly straight, as you can tell. And that was because I was making sure I had enough fabric to be able to cut out all the pieces. I had been hoarding this material here for a while for the perfect bag, and then this came along and I was like, I'm going to use it and it's going to be for myself. So it's okay that it's not, you know, perfectly cut perfectly straight. I made sure I was able to get all my pattern pieces cut. Now, what we need to do is make long thread tails. So get long thread tails out of your machine. And then we're going to stitch the outer edge only of the overlay. So the outer edge is this top, sides, bottom, and other side. So the outer edge, not close to the zipper opening window, the outer edge. And we're going to stitch all the way around, but we're not going to backstitch. We're going to leave these long thread tails and we're going to pull them through to the back and tie them off. So starting, you're going to start stitching. And I'm not quite using the length that I would use for top stitching, but I'm not using the length that I would use for constructing a bag. I'm sort of using the length in between those two. And I'm in the corner. Now, you can pivot your needle to make sure it catches the bobbin, but the other little handy trick is to turn your stitch length to 0, take one stitch, return your stitch length back to the length you were using, and then turn that corner. And that'll just make sure you don't get those angled stitches in your corners. Now, if you're using a busier fabric or print on your overlay that will not show backstitching and you don't want to pull through your threads and tie them off and do all this, you definitely don't have to. You can backstitch, because a busier print, or if you're using material like I am with thread that matches, I could backstitch here too and you wouldn't see it as much. But for the tutorial, I'm following exactly what the designer is having us do. So I'm leaving long thread tails. I got to the last stitch that I started in. I'm going to pull on the back threads here, and it causes this little loop to come up from the front thread. Put my scissors or your awl or whatever you have through the loop, and then just pull them through to the back, just like that. So now we have 4 threads at the back, and I'm going to separate them so you can see them on camera. So we have these 4 threads here, all at the back. So now what I'm going to do is tie these together. So we're going to knot them, but first I'm going to cut them the same length. I just find it's easier to deal with them if they're all the same length. So put them in a pair and then tie it in a knot. You can also add a little dab of glue to your knot, or some fray stop if you want. I haven't had any issues with knots coming undone. I just tie them really tight and cut it off. Now, flip this over, and that's how it looks. It's all stitched around. Now we need to cut out that opening area of where the zipper opening is here. We need to cut this out. So what I usually do is take my seam ripper, where is it? Right here, and start a hole in the center of the overlay, and then I cut down the center. Careful not to cut the overlay. So I stop just before I get to the overlay. So now I have that opening there. Oops, that's upside down. The opening here. Flip to the back, and with my duckbill scissors, I go underneath so that I'm between the overlay and the lining. And I cut it. And then we're going to cut this away all the way around. Careful not to cut your overlay. So if you have to keep checking, just take the time to stop and check and make sure you're not cutting your overlay. And this trimming away, your snipping or cutting doesn't have to be perfect. If it's a bit wavy, it's okay, because this is going to be hidden after. So just like that, I've cut it all completely away without cutting my overlay. So now we have the zipper window, and as you can see, it's not cut all pretty and perfect, and that's okay, because again, nobody's going to see this. Now, if you haven't already, you'll want to attach your zipper pull to your zipper, and Andrea does give the instructions for how you can do this in the pattern. I also have a little tutorial on my YouTube channel, which I will link below, for how to get a pull onto a zipper using my handy dandy zipper helper. So this is for the lining pocket. So now we need to take the zipper and apply some double-sided tape along both long edges of the zipper. And you want to stop where the zipper window opening is, because you don't want it to go any further. You want to be able to pull it away. I mean, you still could even with the double-sided tape, but if you're using glue, you won't be able to. So just apply the double-sided tape so that it's within the window on both long edges of the zipper. So I just lay it on top of the zipper window. Do it this way. Again, with double-sided tape, I'm not always concerned about this because I can pull it back. It's not permanent. So just like that. Now we're going to center this in that zipper window opening. So the best way to do this is I flip it over, and I line this up so I see where my tape starts and stops, so I know that that's approximately where it's going to go, and then flip it over and I make any adjustments that are necessary. This dangly zipper is making it a little bit harder. There we go. Push it down, and it should look like that, all nicely centered. Now we need to flip back over to the wrong side, and we need to use some double-sided tape again, and you're going to add a line of tape or glue along the bottom edge of the zipper tape, just above the stitching. So above that previous stitching here that we did, that's where you're going to add the tape. Remove the paper backing. Ow. I just punched my sewing machine, that kind of hurt. Now we need to take our zipper pocket K piece, and we're going to place this so it is pretty sides down against the back of the lining. So it's pretty sides against the wrong side of the lining and zipper. And you're going to line up this edge here, the long edge, which will be the top edge when you have it flipped around, but you're going to line up one of the long edges with that stitch line that you did previously when we stitched that zipper overlay onto our lining. So it lines up with the stitching. So you see my stitching there, I'm trying to get a little bit closer, and I line it up with that, and it goes all the way across. I'm going to add some clips here just to help hold this up there in place. So when I flip over right now, I'm seeing the right side of both pieces, and this may seem a little bit weird, or it's like it's not making sense, but when we end up stitching that and we turn the pocket down, it ends up being the right way. Another thing is you can use some masking tape here instead of double-sided tape if you want. The choice is yours. I'm using double-sided tape just because that's what I have. Now, turn this back over so we're looking at the right side of everything. And we're going to stitch along the bottom edge of the zipper here, just along the bottom edge. And you want to pay attention to what Andrea says in the pattern for where you're starting and stopping, because that is very important for when we stitch the second side on. Now we're not back stitching again, we're leaving long thread tails. And we're stitching along the bottom edge of the zipper. When I get to that zipper pull, I'm going to zip it out of the way. And there I am. I'm at the end where I need to be. Lift up my needle, pull the threads, leave long thread tails, and that's how it looks on the back side. So I've just stitched under the zipper here. Now pull on this thread and it causes a little loop, and I'm going to show you what I mean if I can get it to come up. There we go. So we have this little loop here. So can you see I'm pulling on the loop there? And I just pull it up. And I'm going to do that on the other side too. And that just pulls the threads to the back so that we can tie them off. And then there's no back stitching here. Be careful how tight you're pulling on your threads. I've had it happen to me before where I've pulled them too tight and it breaks the threads. Although not totally a bad thing because of how we're stitching this here. What you can do is just go back, unpick a few stitches so that you can pull the threads to the back, tie them off, and then start again. No back stitching. You'll start in the hole you stopped in and then go all the way to the end again, pull all the threads through to the back and tie them off. So you'll end up having, a thread tied off here, pulled through and tied off, then a thread started here, pulled through and tied off, and then stopped over here and tied off. Again, if you want to backstitch because you're using a thread that'll really blend or a busy material, you definitely can. So that's how that looks. Now we're going to remove these clips and press this down. Press this pocket down out of the way. And what I like to do is add a pin to help hold it down, just like that. So it's now being held down. Now we need to repeat that, but we're repeating it with the top of the zipper now. So I'm just going to close this zipper pocket up so it's nice and flat. And we're going to add tape, same thing, just above the zipper where that stitching is, because we're going to line up the zipper pocket with that stitching line. So the top edge of the zipper pocket is going to be lined up with the zipper line. So remember where the top is. Here's my top, lining it up with that previous stitching line, and I got to flip it this way so I can see what I'm doing. Same thing as we did before. Now the other thing I'm going to make sure is that my side edges of my pockets line up as well. That's really important too. So if yours isn't exactly in line with where the stitching starts and stops, you'll want to make sure that you do just line up the sides of your pocket here so that they are nicely lined up. So that's how that looks. Now I'm flipping it back to the right side, and I'm going to stick this pin through all the layers so that that pocket stays down and it doesn't go up under my needle when I'm stitching. Again, with long thread tails, we're going to start in this hole we stopped in down here, go up the side, across the top, and back down the other side, stopping in the hole we originally started in. Leave long thread tails, we'll pull them through to the back. So starting where I stopped, not back stitching. And I'm going to zip my zipper out of the way. Pivot and come down the side. And I'm in the hole I started in. Pull my thread tails so they're long. And again, same thing we did before. Pull them through to the back, if I can do this. And tie them off. And just tie your knots. And you can also add the glue to this if you want for some extra security. Oops. I just knot them a few times. There's one. Now we're working on the second one. Knot it a few times. And now that's done. I'm flipping it over, removing the pin, and that's how it looks on the back side. Now what we need to do is clip the sides. And we're going to trim this bottom edge here so that they are all even. Just like that. So make sure it's all even. Now we need to turn this bottom up using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And this is just for the lining pocket, not for the exterior. The exterior you will close off. And also this is just if you're doing the birthing method. So if you're not doing the birthing method, what you will do is stitch it exactly the same way you will the exterior. And for the exterior, what you do is you just stitch all around the three sides, moving your exterior, or in this case, the lining, out of the way. So I'm just finger pressing my seams And what this does is this helps when we close the bag later. This helps make it easier to get a nice closing of the pocket. Makes it easier on you. And I'm just using clips to help hold it in place for now. I will go press with my iron after, but for now I'm just doing that. So again, I'm doing the birthing method, so that's why I've folded these edges to the wrong side like that. Now I'm just going to stitch down the side edges of the pocket only. And again, this is for the birthing method. Make sure your stitch length is at the length you use when you like to stitch a bag together. So there's one edge, or one side. Now I'm going to sew the other side. Whoops. So I'm stitching all the way up. And it won't let me back because the zipper's in the way, so I'm going to turn around. Oops. There we go. So again, I've left this opening in the bottom of my pocket because I'm doing the birthing method. So I need the bottom of this pocket to stay open so that I can turn the bag right sides out and sew up my bottom. If you're doing the birthing method and constructing the front exterior, you'll sew all the way down the side, across the bottom, and up the other side. And if I said birthing, I meant if you're doing the drop-in lining method. So again, down the side, across the bottom, and up the other side. That's for the exterior and for the drop-in lining method. And you'll do that for the drop-in lining method on both the lining pocket and exterior. If you're doing the birthing method like I am, your lining pocket needs to stay open like this. So I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to go sew the exterior pocket, and I will come back and we will continue on. So here's how the exterior zipper pocket looks when you have the zipper installed, and this is how your pockets will look as well if you're doing the drop-in lining. So I've sewn all the way around all three sides of the pocket so that it is completely closed. And your exterior pocket will look this way if you're doing the birthing method. If you're doing the drop-in lining, all your pockets, your zipper pockets, will look like this. So we're going to place this to the side for now. Now we're going to work on our flap. Now, there is an option to use a magnetic snap if you're wanting to do that and you don't have the hardware. That instruction is given in the last pages of the pattern, so you'll want to refer to that for if you're using a magnetic snap, which I am. So I already have my marks made for where to place my magnetic snap. So I'm going to place one magnetic snap, 1/2 on the lining side of my flap. Now, if you're not adding a magnetic snap, you'll skip this whole part that I'm instructing here right now. This whole part will be skipped. I can't get these apart. Oh my goodness. I can't get these apart, and there's even this little plastic. There we go. That was crazy. So we need to grab our tools for cutting slits. So first we're going to take our washer and we're going to line it up with that mark that we made. So there's a mark on the bottom of the flap up that you need to make. So we're going to use our washer and line it up centered with that mark that we made. Then use our seam ripper to cut the slits. And depending on your magnetic snap, your instructions may be a little bit different. You'll want to use your manufacturer's instructions for installing your magnetic snap. Oops. Then we need to add a piece of heavy interfacing as well. So we'll cut slits on our heavy interfacing as well. And I just wanted to give you a little tip. If you're worried when you're making the slits for your magnetic snap that you're going to push too far with your seam ripper, excuse me, what you can do is where those marks are that you made for the slits, insert your pin at the top edge of that first mark and then come out the other side at the top of that second mark you made for the prongs, just like that. Then you'll take your seam ripper and you'll cut those slits. You'll use your seam ripper to cut them. And what that does is the pin, if you can see, it acts as a barrier or a guard, so I can't push any further with my seam ripper. It stops the seam ripper from going any further. And the reason why I say to go in through the top of the first mark and in through the top of the second mark is because you don't end up with pinholes, because we're going to be cutting up to that mark, and you don't end up with pinholes somewhere else in your material. Now, taking your washer or your magnetic snap, and you're going to insert it through the right side, so it's on the right side. Push it through, place your piece of interfacing, heavy interfacing, then your washer, fold your prongs, and I like to fold them so they hug my fabric, just like that. And then one more thing I like to do is add a piece of tape to cover the prongs. Just like that. And there we have it. Half of our magnetic snap is installed. Now, if you're not wanting to add the magnetic snap and you're wanting to use the hardware that has I think it's called a thumb lock, one of those locks, you will not add this magnetic snap, you won't cut any slits. So this is where you're going to start. So with your flat pieces, place one right side up and the other one right sides together with it. Line up the edges, clip it all the way around. You can even line up your center mark. Add some clips all the way around. There we go. And now we're going to sew the flap with the seam allowance given in the pattern. And I'm just making sure my stitch length is at the length I use for stitching a bag together. Now on these curves, if you have a hard time going around the curves, what you can do is take one stitch with your needle down in your fabric, lift up your presser foot, pivot your fabric a little bit, take one more stitch, and keep repeating that. Needle down, presser foot up, pivot the fabric, take one stitch, and do that all the way around the curve. And that'll help you get a nice curve. And just go all the way around. Now we're not stitching the top edge of the flap. We're just stitching the sides and the curves. Now we're going to trim the seam allowances down. And I'm using pinking shears. It's a little bit hard to see because I use black thread. So I trimmed the seams down. Now we're going to turn the flap right sides out through the opening at the top. If you're using quilting cotton, you can take this to your iron and give it a really good press. I'm using vinyl, so I can't. So I'm just using my turning tool here to help get the corners and curves all poked out really nicely. I'm just going to add some clips, and then we're going to top stitch around the entire edge of the flap using the seam allowance given in the pattern, including the top edge. We're going to close that opening up in the top edge, so you'll come down the side, around the curve, up the other side, and across the top as well. Use your favorite top stitch length. And now I'm stitching the top of the opening closed. I took my time going around the flap so I get a really nice curve when I'm stitching. Just like that. So that's how your flap will look. Now, if you've added the magnetic snap, you'll have the magnetic snap on the lining side and your exterior will have nothing. If you're not adding the hardware, you will not adding the magnetic snap. Both sides will look like this. So now we need to grab our main exterior slip pocket. So that's this piece here, and I've marked it C and I've marked SP so I know that it's the slip pocket piece. On this slip pocket piece, if you're using the hardware as given in the pattern, so the little push lock, thumb lock, or tongue lock, there's a mark that you need to make from the top down, and you'll want to make that mark. Once you have that mark made, and there's also a measurement given, you will install the half of your push lock using your manufacturer's instructions. Once you have that done, we will then move on to adding our lining. However, because I'm adding a magnetic snap, I need to make a mark here for where my magnetic snap is going to go when I close my bag. So I've already made that mark, and again, this is in the last page of the pattern. And I'm going to make the mark with my washer. So I'm going to grab out all my pieces. I guess I could just dump this. Grab out all my pieces, all my tools again. Seems kind of funny that I just put them away. And using my washer, I'm going to make that mark again for where my prongs are going to be. And I'll use my pin here so you can see. So I'm going in through the top of the washer mark and out through the other side at the top so you can see it better there. Use my seam ripper. And you see how my pin stops me? I can't go any further than where that pin is. Just a handy little extra tip for you for when you're putting any kind of slits into a bag. Because I've had it happen where I've cut a little bit too far, and sometimes it doesn't matter depending on what you're cutting. For example, this, you're interfacing, it doesn't really matter if you cut it all the way up on one side. But when you're cutting a bag and you're cutting into the center of a bag, you definitely don't want to cut too far. Now you'll take this magnetic snap and you'll install it, pushing it through the right side, through where those prong holes are. For some reason, I can't do this. There we go. Push your heavy interfacing, then your washer, and then fold your prongs. And again, I like to fold mine so they hug my fabric. You can fold yours if you want them folded out or one out and one in. The choice is yours. Some tape. Oops, I just threw my tape a little too far. I'll have to stop and get that after. And that's how it looks right now. My snap snaps in place. You may have half of your twist lock there, if that's what you've chosen to, or not twist lock, half of your thumb lock. So now that we have that piece of hardware attached, we need to join the slip pocket exterior and lining together. So you're going to take the slip pocket exterior, place it right sides up with the top at the top here. Then you're going to place your slip pocket lining right sides together. So they're going to be pretty sides touching. And we're going to clip along that top edge all the way across, just like that. Then what we'll do is we'll sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern, and don't forget to return your stitch length back to the length you used for stitching a bag. Stitch all the way across. Just like that. Then we're going to turn it so that they are wrong sides together. And what I like to do is place a clip at the bottom, so all along the bottom. Just like that. Then I'll take my turning tool because I've used a vinyl, so I can't take it to my iron and press. And I'll use my turning tool to press this seam at the top so that it pushes out. Just like that. So I ran it along the seam. Now I'm going to add some clips along the top. Again, because I've used vinyl here on the exterior, I can't really press this. I could press from the wrong side, but I worry about accidentally hitting my vinyl. I don't want to damage it, or the faux leather, sorry. There we go. And now we're going to top stitch this top edge using the seam allowance given in the pattern and using your favorite top stitch length. There we go. Trim your threads. And that's how that looks so far, with a beautiful top stitched edge all the way across. Now we need to take this and attach this to our exterior. I'm just returning my stitch length back to the length it was for stitching a bag together. So now we're going to take the exterior and we're going to place it right sides up. And I was just looking to make sure the top is at the top. So where it says T, it's at the top. And we're going to take the slip pocket and place it so it is lining against the exterior. So lining is against the exterior. So both the exterior pieces are right sides up. And we're going to clip this in place. So clip it all the way around. Start at your bottom corners. Clip them together. And clip up the sides. Making sure your sides stay lined up. Just like that. And then we're going to sew the slip pocket in place. So across the, down the side, sorry, across the bottom and up the other side. I'm going to start in the middle so that I prevent any shifting, and we're basting this in place. So you can use a longer stitch length if you want. When you're basting, a longer stitch length is okay to use because it's hidden within the seam allowance, and it's what basting is doing is helping hold things together until you sew the actual bag together. So I'm starting again in the center. Sometimes I'll go down one side, down the other side, and then I'll stitch across the bottom, and sometimes I do this. This is just to prevent shifting. That's why I do it this way, or the way I was saying, which is stitch down one side, stitch down the other side, and then across the bottom. All just to prevent shifting. Now I'm just trimming threads, returning my stitch length, and there we have it. So far, that is how our bag is looking so far if we put our snap on. Looks so nice. I love it. It's so pretty. So now we're going to take our bottom with this piece here, this completed exterior, and place our bottom so it is the bottom edge, bottom long edge is lined up with the bottom edge of this exterior with the slip pocket. So line them up so they're right sides together. So pretty sides are going to be touching. Line up your corners. Just like that. And we're going to sew along this bottom edge using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Make sure your stitch length, if you changed it to a top stitch length, is back to the length you use for stitching a bag together. Now, another thing to note, if you're worried about the bulk here and your machine, you think it's going to struggle, try using a longer stitch length, a bigger needle, and also a walking foot or a humper jumper will also help. So now we need to flatten the seam with our fingers, and we need to top stitch this seam. And the seam is going down towards the bottom piece. So you're having it so that it flips down, and you can see my seam allowance right now goes towards the bottom, and that's what you want. You want it towards the bottom piece. And then I'm going to top stitch this all the way across. We're top stitching on top of the bottom piece. So through all that bulk, through all the seams. And I'm taking my time here because I have to hold the other end so that it doesn't get stuck on my light here. Returning my stitch length back to the length I used so I don't forget. And that's how that looks when it's top stitched. Moving right along, we need to grab our exterior top band. So that is B, so the B piece is here. And there are some marks that you need to make. Those measurements are given in the pattern. And the marks will be from the sides over, depending on the size of bag you're making. So I'm making the large, so I use the measurements given for the large. And this is for where we're going to attach our handles or for the handle connector placements. So if you're doing the handle connectors and the handle connector placements, it's going to be the same, except for your handle connectors have hardware on, and you will not be attaching your handles just yet to the connectors. You're just attaching your handle connector at this moment. So if this was the handle connector with your hardware, you just sew it on and leave it, that's it. I'm attaching handles, so I'm going to add my handle now. And I'm going to place it so that it is inside the line. So here's that mark I made, and I'm going to place it to the inside of the line on both sides. And when you come down and around, you want to make sure that your strap or handle, is not twisted. And I can hear Buddy behind me. She's trying to get up on the table. So you want to make sure that your handle is not twisted. So we're going to clip it, lining it up with that line. So clip it in place. And I'm going to clip the other side as well, lining it up at that line. Just like that. And then we'll baste the bottom edges together. What? So we're going to baste along the bottom edge. For both the handles. Hi, coming up. Took a weird way to get here. Climbed through my handle of my, or the armrest of my chair. That was strange. So that's how the handle is going to look when it's attached. And remember, we made them so that they're a bit stiffer so they'll stand up. Now we're going to repeat that for the other side. So, hi. So again, place your handle and make sure you have that seam where the two edges met when we folded it. So that's the folded seam, you can see it here, are both pointing in the same direction on the bag. So it just depends on how you want it to be when you're holding the bag together. Yes, hi. Okay, I can't see what I'm doing. You're very demanding. Yes. And now we're going to baste the second one together. Okay, watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out. No, you can't do that right now. It's very dangerous. Yeah, hang on. Okay, hang on. Hang on. Oh, you're very pushy today. You're really testing my sewing skills, eh? So I'm just going to trim all my threads. Oh, geez. That was kind of aggressive. So that's how they look once you have your handles all attached. And you may have your strap connectors attached. Now we need to take our flap, and on one of the exterior top band pieces, we need to line up the flap so that it is centered between the handle connectors and baste it in place. So I'm just going to add clips here again to kind of help hold my handles nice and straight. Yes, okay, hang on, go over here for a minute. And because I used a magnetic snap, I want the magnetic snap half to be facing up right now. Yes, shake a paw, good girl. And we're going to center this. So I'm going to find the center mark with the flap. I'm sorry. Yeah. Guess she's starving for attention. It's a long time to go without getting attention, eh? Oh my goodness. So I'm just clipping my flap in place, making sure it's centered. And thank you. Thank you for the kisses. Okay. Okay. Yes. Shake a paw. Making sure it's centered. And I'm going to take it over here to a ruler, and I'm just going to measure the distance between the handle and the flap to make sure that they are the same on both sides. Yes. Thank you. Oh my goodness. You're not going to let me get this done, are you? Yes. Okay. So now we're going to baste the flap in place. Now that we know it is centered, we're going to baste it in place. Cut your threads. How about you go lay down over there? I know it'll get you to lay down. She likes to lay down on a sweater of mine, so I'm going to put that down over here so she'll lay down on it. Here, buddy. Look, made like your little nest. Look. That's just Missy Bear. Go over here. Go on your bed. Lay on that sweater. No, lay on the sweater. Here, see? Now we need to take one of these and we need to place it on our exterior main with the magnetic snap. So the piece that I'm taking right now is the slip pocket and the magnetic snap is here. So, ooh, buddy, you're shedding. That's a lot of fur. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the slip pocket, place it right sides up, and place the exterior top band right sides down together with the top edge of the exterior with the slip pocket. Of course, you're not going to lay on the sweater that I put down. You'll lay right where you're going to be against the computer. So I'm just clipping along the top edge, and make sure your magnetic snap lines up as well. And mine does. I've clipped it in place. So now we're going to sew across this top edge all the way across, sewing it with the seam allowance given in the pattern. And if you don't have a magnetic snap, you're not snapping yours in place. Right now, all you'll see is the bottom half of your lock that you've installed, if you're using a thumb lock or any of the other locks. All right, so that's how it looks when it's just stitched. So now we take this and we need to pull the exterior band up and turn the seam allowances down towards the main. So to do that, you'll take this, turn it, and then you'll flip these so that your handle gets flipped up. And I'm just pressing from the back side right now. Lift up your flap because we're going to be stitching now under this area here, so on the main exterior. So you're not stitching over the flap and you're not stitching over the handle. So they need to be up how I have them, like this. And we're top stitching across that whole edge where my red is. So that's on the main exterior. Use your stitch length that you like to use for top stitching and go all the way across. And because the handles will add some bulk there, you can use a humper jumper to help get over them, or even your walking foot, a bigger needle. I'm using my 9014 needle still, and it did really good. It went over it really well. So that's how that looks. Looks really pretty. Selfishly, this is a selfish sew. I'm making this bag for myself because I love red. Red is my favorite color, and I've wanted a red and black bag for a while, so I will be switching to this bag right after I'm done with my one I'm using right now. So look how pretty that looks so far. Now we're going to take the other main exterior piece, the one with the zipper pocket, and we're going to add the exterior top band to this piece. So same thing, lay it right side up so your zipper pocket is at the top. Place your top band piece so that your handle is pointing down. Line up the long raw edges. Pin it all the way across. And then we're going to stitch this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Don't forget to use your stitch length that you use for stitching a bag together. Trim your threads. And then repeat the same way we did for the first one, where we're flipping this so that the seam allowance goes down towards our exterior. You're going to lay on your little bed here? No? Going to see your sister. She hears Missy. She's going to investigate. So now I'm going to have my handle pointing up and I'm going to top stitch again along where the red is there. So switching to my favorite top stitch length. And you'll notice I never give a stitch length for when I'm top stitching or stitching my seams together. And that's because every machine is different. So for example, on my industrial, the stitch length I may use on this machine for stitching seams together or top stitching may be different than it is on my industrial. So depending on the machine you're using, you know your machine the best and what stitch lengths your machine likes to use or is good for your machine. I don't give the stitch length because I don't know what machine you're using. If you're using the exact same one as mine, even if you are, sometimes stitch lengths can be a little bit different. So that's how that one looks right now, all top stitched. I just think it's so pretty. I'm so excited to finish this. Now we're going to take our completed exterior front piece, so that's the piece with the flap here, and if you're not using a magnetic snap, yours can't snap in place, you can use some clips here to help hold this down for now so that it doesn't get stuck up in the way. But what we're going to do is, this one is right sides up, we're going to place the back wrong sides up, so it's pretty sides touching, line up this bottom edge, clip it in place. And I'm just flipping mine around because that way there I can line everything up better. So line up the side edges and the centers. Clip it across. And then we're going to stitch this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Ensure your stitch length is at the length you use for constructing your bags. And you shouldn't be stitching over any interfacing that you've added to the bag because it was cut out of the seam allowance. Now again, that seam, just like we did previously, goes down towards, so you see here, it's going towards the bottom, and that's what you want, to go towards the bottom of the bag. And we're going to top stitch that down. So again, back to your stitch length that you like to use for top stitching. And there's a lot to hold, so I'm just going to go slow because I don't want my handle getting accidentally stitched over or anything else getting stitched over that shouldn't. Return your stitch length back to the length you'll use for stitching your bag together. And there you have it. We have this so far, one long piece for our exterior. Now there is some marks that you need to make on your exterior here where your handles are for adding rivets. So I'm going to go off camera because I'm going to make those marks and those measurements, and I'm going to punch my holes. We're not installing the rivets just yet, but I'm going to make the marks and punch the holes. If you don't have rivets, what you could do is sew a little box here all the way around, or make a mark, sorry, and you'll sew a little box here, but wait till the end to sew the box unless you don't think that you can get your machine and your bag under your machine. So say you don't have a free arm, or some people have a cylinder arm. If you don't, then you can go ahead and stitch that box now if you're worried that you won't be able to, when the bag's all finished, get it under your machine, and stitch a box here with an X in it. Take your time to really make sure you get a really nice box and a really nice X. So draw it out first with something that you can remove easily and then stitch around, because you do have that interfacing back here that'll help with the extra security as well. And that's just something you can do just to help give extra security. Or if you don't have rivets at all or Chicago screws and you don't want to do the stitching, you definitely don't have to. You can just leave it as is. But that does add a bit of extra security, having that stitching or those rivets and Chicago screws here. So I'm going to go make those measurements and punch the holes, and then we'll come back and we'll continue on with making our bag. Moving right along, now that our exterior is done, or the exterior front and back, we need to take our side pieces and we need to attach our connectors to the side. So in the pattern, there is a measurement given for where to place the side connectors. So you want to make a mark from the top down and mark across, and also mark your center on your side panels if you haven't done that already. And side panels are D, and they look like this sort of teardrop shape. Once you have that mark, we're going to use the double-sided tape to help hold it in place. So I took the paper backing off, and I'm going to line up the top edge of my connector here with this mark I made. And I'm centering it on the side panel. So getting it centered, placing it down. And another thing I'm going to do is use some painter's tape. You can use washi tape if you want. I'm just going to place some painter's tape on this piece. And that'll just help hold it in place so that while I sew, it'll help hold it in place. Now, there is a mark for where we're going to stitch. So you're going to stitch measuring from the top edge of the side connector down, and that's where you're going to stop stitching. So I'm going to remove this tape, and I'm just going to go off camera really quick, and I'm going to make that mark on my connector for where we're going to stop stitching. So I'll be right back. So I've made that mark. Now I know where to stop stitching. So there's the mark that I made. So what you're going to do is, starting in the middle of the bottom of the connector, you're going to stitch across the bottom, up the side to this mark, across at the mark, back down the side, and across the bottom. We won't be back stitching though. We'll be leaving long thread tails just like we did for the zipper overlay. So I'm just trying to grab my thread here. So starting at the bottom, in the middle, start with my needle down. I'm going to remove these two clips now. I don't need them anymore. And I'm just going to start stitching all the way across, up the side of the connector, and I just want to make sure that that gets stitched in the corner and I don't get an angled stitch there. So I'm just putting my stitch length to 0. And before I start stitching, I'll take another stitch with my stitch length at 0 and then continue down. And I want to make sure my threads are out of the way that I began with. Just taking one stitch in the corner, turn the corner, and go all the way across until I reach the stitch where I started. So I'm back where I started, lift up my presser foot, leave long thread tails, and we're going to pull them and tie them off in the back. Just like that. So I've got them pulled through to the back. Now I'm going to put them in pairs and tie them off. Oh, that one didn't tie. Tie it a few times. And then cut your threads, and it'll look like this, which I know it might be a little bit hard to see. Actually, you can see the stitching all the way around. Now what we need to do is make a mark above where the stitching is and place a rivet there. If you don't have rivets, what you could do instead is, instead of stitching across here at that mark we made, go all the way up as close to your hardware as you can, stitch down under the hardware and back down the other side and back down here. Then what you can do is stitch an X inside that box as well, and that'll just add that extra reinforcement for you, which is what the rivet is doing too. So I'm going to go off camera, add my rivet, I'll attach my other side connector here, and then I'll come back and we will attach our sides to our bag. All right, so I've added the rivets to my side pieces. I'm just making sure my microphone's still on because I have a lot of issues with the microphone dying and me not knowing. Now we need to take one of the side pieces and we need to place it so it is right sides together with the base, lining up the center marks on the base with the center mark at the bottom of the side. So line that up just like that. So the center of the bottom of the side is lined up with the center mark on the bottom of the base, or on the side of the base actually. So clip along the bottom, then take your exterior and bring it so that the side and exterior front or back, whichever one you're grabbing at, I'm realizing I'm grabbing the back, line up at the top here and place a clip, and then clip it down that side edge a little bit. And then attach the other side in the same manner. So line up the top edges here of the side with the top edge of your exterior. Clip it in place. And then we're going to continue clipping all the way down, easing the fabrics in as we go around the curve. So I'm coming up to this curve here, so I'm just going to keep easing my fabrics in around the curve, evenly distributing it, placing clips as I go. And if you've used all accurate seam allowances, you'll notice that this fits perfectly. And that just snapped on my finger, it kind of hurt. Now, You can use staples if you want along these edges here to help hold everything in place while you're sewing. Instead of only the clips. So you'll clip it and then you'll staple it all the way around, removing your clips as you're stapling so that nothing shifts on you while you're sewing. And then when we're done, you'll remove your staples, trim our seam allowances, and continue on. Where did that go? There it is, I heard it right there. All right, so I have that all clipped all the way around, just like that. Now, what I like to do is I like to make small snips into the curves here, because what happens when you do that is you make a snip, so same where between my fingers is the snip. As I'm going around the curve, it'll open it up, letting that ease around. So I'm going to make small snips just within the seam allowance between each of my clips. Just within that seam allowance, so don't go any further. There's a lot of bulk there that I just snipped through. I wish you could hear it. Missy's snoring away on my futon right now, and it's so cute. I guess she likes the sound of my machine. Now I'm going to switch to my zipper foot because it's a nice thin foot and it'll help me really get around that curve without any issues. This is another suggestion in the pattern. Or am I thinking of? So yeah, so we'll sew it around using a narrow foot or a zipper foot, and I'm using a narrow foot, all the way around that curve. So start at the top, make sure you're using your seam allowance or stitch length that you use when stitching a bag together, and we're using the seam allowance given in the pattern as well. Back stitch at start and stop. And the nice thing about this narrow foot is that it keeps you away from the interfacing. Also move this pocket out of the way too as you're stitching. You don't want the pocket to get under your needle. And the other thing I like to do when I'm coming up to these curves is not remove any clips until my presser foot touches them. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going slowly around the curves. Excuse me. So every time I get to a clip, I just remove that clip. I don't remove it until my presser foot is touching it, and what that does is that just helps ensure that nothing shifts on me at all. Because it's keeping everything clipped together nicely and tight. And then I'm coming back up the straight edge here. So as you saw, I took my time going around that curve, making sure I kept everything nice and flat as I went around. Just going to trim the threads. There's a clip that dropped somewhere. There it is. Now, this is where you're going to want to turn the bag right now and just see how it looks. And I know the Decoville Heavy kind of makes it a little bit more difficult. So just don't be afraid to squish it, because you can use your iron later to get inside your bag and really fix everything. So I'm just looking to make sure everything looks good. And then what I'm going to do is add a second line of stitching all the way around. So everything looks beautiful to me. It looks like a really nice curve. I'm really happy with how it looks. I'm going to take this and turn this again. And I'm going to stitch a second row of stitching just to the outside of the first row of stitching. And I'm just going to take my time again at that curved part. And all this is doing is it's just adding some extra strength to that seam. But take your time, especially at the curve. You don't want to create any puckers, and make sure you're staying to the outside of your original stitching. Oops. You can kind of see I didn't stay right beside it. That's okay. It's hard to see when it's black thread on black. I didn't stay right beside it, but I didn't go in towards the other seam allowance at all. That's okay. Now what we need to do is trim this seam allowance down, and then at the curved part, what you want to do is make those snips into the curves, but I already did that, so I don't need to do that. So you're going to trim it down, but you want to leave up at the top here, there's a measurement given, untrimmed. So you don't want to trim the top part here. And for the drop-in lining method, you're going to trim the seam allowance down, but there's a measurement you need to make for where you're going to trim to. So you want to pay attention to that. So I'm going to go off camera. I'll trim this seam allowance. I'll add my second side exterior, and when we come back, this will be completed and we'll be able to move on to completing our bag. So my exterior is all constructed. I'm going to leave it so that it is wrong sides out for now, but you'll see it's all constructed. I've cut down my seams. Another thing I like to do is press these seams that we didn't trim so that they're open. So I use a little bit of double-sided tape, but I also stitch at the top. So I base stitch them so they stay open. This is really helpful for any style that you're doing. So whether you're doing the drop-in method or you're doing the birthing method, it just helps this bulk here stay open and reduces the bulk at the top. So move your bag off to the side for now. We're going to work on constructing our interior slip pocket L, and that is this piece right here. And we will also need one of our linings. But first, what we're going to do is take your interior slip pocket and fold it so it goes right sides together. So you want to fold it so that the top edge and the bottom edge line up. Then once you get this all clipped in place, we're going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. And I've also switched back to my regular foot because I knew we were going to be moving on. So if you haven't already, switch back to your regular foot. And if you changed your stitch length as well for stitching the sides, switch it back to the stitch length you use for constructing your bags. Trim the threads, and I'm just going to trim the threads that are sort of fraying here. There we go. Turn it right sides out. So you're turning it right sides out through one of the openings on the sides. And what we will do is we will go and take this to our iron, and we will iron this completely flat. So I'm just going to press this seam with my turning tool first. So I pressed the seam with my turning tool. Now I'm going to take this to my iron and I'm going to press this really good, nice and flat. And then we'll come back and we will attach this to our lining main. So I've pressed this slip pocket really nice and crisp as best I could. Now we're going to top stitch the top edge. And the top edge that I like to top stitch is not the edge where we have the seam here, but the opposite edge. So that's where I like to top stitch, just so that other edge is at the bottom of the bag and you don't see it. Trim your threads. And then return your stitch length. Don't forget to do that. Then grab your remaining lining main panel, and that is piece J. And we're going to place the slip pocket on the lining panel. Now, there are marks that you need to make, so you'll want to refer to the pattern for that. So the marks are from the top down, and you'll make those marks. So I've already got my marks made. Now I'm going to place the top edge at that top mark that I made, lining up the side edges and the top edges. Clip it in place along the entire side edge on both sides. Again, lining up those marks. And then we're going to sew the bottom of the pocket. I just want to make sure, yeah. So we're going to top stitch the bottom of the pocket. So I'm going to switch my stitch length and top stitch along the bottom of the pocket only. Trim any threads. Now, this is where we need to make some marks on our slip pocket to give it a divided slip pocket. So you're going to want to make a center mark here. So you'll want to use your centering on your pattern here. So you can fold it in half and create a crease, just like that. Or you can use your ruler. But the crease is good. I can see the crease, so I'm just going to trace it over with my Clover Choco. Sorry if I start sneezing. Sometimes the chalk tickles my nose. So I've just drawn the center crease that I have. So now we need to stitch this. So we're going to stitch down the side, across the bottom, up this center line, pivot, stitch across the top, then come back down that center line, stitch across the bottom and back up. Now you'll want to pay attention to what the seam allowance is when you're at the bottom and when you're stitching up this center line, because you're not stitching right on the center line, you're stitching to the left and to the right of it. So you'll want to pay attention to what that seam allowance is. So we'll start stitching on the side here. And I'm going across the bottom, paying attention to what the seam allowance was given. Up the center, again, paying attention to what that seam allowance was. Across the top. Now, I'm going to add a rivet, but if you're not, you can back stitch over top of that area that we just stitched here at the top for some extra reinforcement. But I'm going to add a rivet, so I did not do that. Back across the bottom. And then up the final side. So it'll look like that, and on the back you'll have this neat design on the back. So I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to install that rivet at the mark given in the pattern, and then I'll come back and we will continue on with constructing our bag. There we go. I've added my rivet to my slip pocket. I forgot what it was called for a second. So I've added the rivet at the top. You don't need to, as I mentioned, you could just stitch across here, back stitching to add some extra security at the top, because that does get a lot of stress with us going in and out of our slip pockets. So that's how it looks there. So now this is done. We'll place this to the side for now. Now we need to grab our eye pieces. So these are the interior top band. We need our zipper, so the main zipper, and the zipper tab. So we'll start with the main zipper. Put those to the side for now. We'll start with the main zipper. So here's the main zipper. If you haven't already, you can cut this to length that is given in the pattern. Once you have it cut to length, there is a measurement from the top short edge here that we need to make down. And then we'll open up the zipper and we'll pinch at that mark. So I'm pinching at that mark, and then I'm turning it so that the zipper teeth go over top of the zipper tape where it is pinched. So pinch, and then turn the zipper at a 90-degree angle, just like that. So it looks like this on the front, and it looks like a little triangle on the back. So again, pinch at the mark that's given in the pattern. So there's that mark. You pinch it there, holding where it's pinched, turn this zipper like that on an angle. We'll add a pin. You can even add a little staple there if you want within the seam allowance, and then remove it once you have it stitched. I do have a tutorial on my YouTube channel showing this in more depth, so I will link that below in the description so that you can watch that if you need a little bit of extra help. Now I'm going to stitch this, just baste it together. And when I'm up near the needle here, I'm just going to hand crank over the needle so I don't break my needle in my machine. So I've hand cranked over the pin. So it looks just like that. Repeat that for the second side. And I'm just going to hand crank to start. Remove the needle, or the pin, sorry. And it looks just like that. Trim your threads. And then you can trim the zipper so that it is even with the zipper tape. So that piece that's hanging off, trim it so it's even with the zipper tape. All right, so now that is how our zipper will look once it's trimmed all even with the sides. So when you zip it up, you don't lose your zipper pull at all. Now we need to deal with this end of the zipper here, and we have a zipper tab. Now, if you're using a raw edge material or a material that you can leave raw edge, you will cut it half the length, which is what I did. But if you're using a material that you can't leave raw edge, what you're going to do is take it, you're going to draw a line in the center. So the center will be going from short edge or long edge to long edge, not straight down the long edges. Then you'll fold it. So each edge, short edge, meets in the middle, just like that. And then what you'll do is with those short edges in the middle, you can use some double-sided tape to help hold it in place. You'll place the zipper right at that center fold and stitch it in place like that. So just like that. Now I'm using raw edge material, so I can just fold it directly in half over top of the zipper tape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a piece of double-sided tape here to help hold my zipper in place when I first place it in. So I've drawn the center line across here. And all I did was cut my zipper tab length, half the length, because I'm leaving it raw edge. And then we fold it over just like that. So that meets in the middle, the zipper meets in the middle. I go right to the center crease. Or in this case, I didn't go right to the center crease because when I fold it over, it's got to have that bit of room. And then I fold it over so that the edges meet just like that. And I'm using double-sided tape just so it doesn't shift on me. And now I'm going to sew across right here where the raw edges or where your folded edges are close to the zipper tape. And I'm going to stitch that in place. Don't forget to backstitch at start and stop, and don't forget to cut all your threads too. There you go. And that's how it looks, front and back. We have a tab and we have a zipper turned so we don't lose our zipper tape, or zipper pull, I mean. Now we need to grab those top interior bands, so piece I, and you'll want to place them so that they are right sides up, but place them together and imagine that your zipper is here in the center. And then there's a measurement that you need to make from the short side edges over on both side edges. Now, when you're making these marks, pay special attention to the measurements given because they are different for each side, because one measurement is for where your zipper is going to start and the other end is where your zipper tab is. So you want to pay special attention to that. Another thing is I've marked 1 and 2 just so I know what side goes with what side of the zipper. So first side and second side. So once you have all those measurements made and those marks made, we can start with our zipper. So you're going to take your interior top band I piece. You're going to place it right sides up. You're going to take your zipper and place it right sides together with the interior top band. It's like tongue twisters. You're going to place this beginning of the zipper at that first mark you made and place the zipper tab at the other end at the other mark that you made. You're going to pin it in place all the way along. Then what you'll do is you'll sew this to the interior top band using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And when I'm approaching this zipper pull, I'm going to zip it out of the way. Just stitch it all the way across. Cut your threads. Then you're going to take this interior top band and attach it to your interior lining, so lining J, with the zipper pocket. So what you're going to do is place the lining right sides up with the pocket, and then you're going to place this interior band right sides together, lining up the edge that has the zipper attached to the top edge of the lining. So line it up. So you're going to be creating a zipper sandwich. That zipper will be lined up in there as well. And I have center marks so I can see where my centers are as well, making sure everything lines up nicely. Now I'm going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern all the way across the main lining and the interior top band. And I'm approaching where my zipper pull is, so I'm just going to slide it out of the way now. I don't want to hit it. It also helps keep that area because a zipper causes a little bit of a bump where it is. So you want to move the pull out of the way so you get rid of that bump and it keeps it nice and straight. So that's how that looks right now with the zipper attached. Both my zippers are closing, going towards the correct position. So they're both going in the same direction when they close. I'm just going to, again, use my cuff to remove the chalk marks because I don't want them to stay there. I can use some water later and rub them out. Now we need to fold the interior top bands back over the, revealing the wrong side of the zipper tape. So you're folding them back this way. Sorry, I went ahead. Sorry. You're pushing the top band so that the seam allowance is down toward the interior top band. Sorry, I had skipped ahead. So we're pressing the seam allowance so that it's going toward the top band. So if you flip this over, this is going up. It's going up this way, not down, up. You're pressing it up, and we're going to top stitch along that top band. And I'm using vinyl, so I can't press it, but if you're using a material that you can press with your iron, you can definitely take it to your iron and give it a press. Use your favorite top stitch length, and also make sure your zipper is out of the way and you're holding on to your zipper pocket as well, because you don't want that going underneath your presser foot as you're stitching. So there's a bit to hold on to and pay attention to, but just take your time and it'll all work out. So that's how that looks so far. We have our top band top stitched and our zipper attached in the center there. Now we need to add the interior top band to the other side of the zipper. So now we're going to place it right sides down on the main lining and clip the bottom together with the zipper. So flip this over, you'll see where your marks are for your zipper, and you're going to line them up. So line up the marks. So right now I'm looking at the wrong side of my zipper, and I know everything's correct because my sides here line up. So I'm looking at the wrong sides of my zipper. I'm just going to open that up a bit, and I'm lining everything up with those marks that I made. Let's get all our marks, all our zipper clipped across, all the way across. And I'm just going to zip this closed now. And then we will stitch this in place using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And again, make sure the side edges of your top interior bands line up. You want them to line up. So now we're going to sew this zipper here. So we have the zipper in between. So you have the wrong side of the zipper up and the right side is against that remaining band. And we're going to sew it with the seam allowance given in the pattern. And I forgot to turn my stitch length back, so I'm just doing that. Now I'm approaching where my zipper is, so I'm just going to slide my pull out of the way. Now I'm going to trim my threads, just like that. And that's what that looks like so far. Now we need to take that remaining lining panel and we need to place it, the one with the slip pocket, so it goes right sides together with that lining that's placed right sides up right now. And the right side of the lining will go against the wrong side of the zipper that we just basted to the top interior band. So clip them together all the way across. Line up those sides. Make sure everything stays lined up. Clip it all the way across. There we go. And now what we need to do is sew this again with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Same thing we did on the other side. It's just now we have all that extra here as well. So just make sure that other main that you've already attached, the other main lining, it doesn't get caught underneath your stitching here or the zipper pocket. So you want to keep everything out of the way. I moved my zipper pull out of the way so I don't stitch over it. Now we need to take that piece that we just attached and we need to turn the seam. So I have it turned around right now. So we just stitched this edge here. I'm flipping it all over, so it didn't move anything. I've just flipped it over. Now I'm going to take that top band and press it up. That means that seam allowance is going up behind my interior top band. And I'm going to again rub out those marks. Bonus of colder weather is I wear longer sleeves, so I just have a sleeve that I can always use to erase chalk. Now I'm going to top stitch that just as I did with the other side, going all the way across, making sure no other fabric but the interior top band and that seam allowance are underneath my needle. So I'm just rolling it all up as you see here. It's all rolled up and I'm stitching across. And when I reach where that zipper pull is, I'll zip it out of the way so that I don't hit it because it's dangly and I don't want to hit it. Cut your threads. And that's how it looks so far with your two interior top bands between and your two linings between. Just like that. You can already see how it's going to look when we sew it together. Now we need to, just scrolling along here, join the two lining pieces together, clipping them together here. First, you're going to line up these seams here where the top bands are. So make sure you pin those seams. It's very important to clip those together so that it looks like one continuous seam. So add some clips. Do that on the other side. So add a clip there, and then clip the top corners. And then you'll clip the rest of the side. Oh, things aren't lining up accurately. There we go. Now we're going to sew the side edges along the sides, both the sides, using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Don't forget to put your stitch length back to the length you use for constructing your bags. I don't even know where that went. As long as it's not in the heater, we're good. Trim all your threads. Now we need to trim the seam allowance, leaving the top edge untrimmed. So you're leaving the top and bottom untrimmed. So I'll show you what I mean. So once I get to the top, I just veer off so it looks like this. And it's hard to see here. So you see how I didn't trim the top edge at all? And I don't trim the bottom either. Now, if you're doing a drop-in method, you need to pay attention to what the measurements are for trimming. If you're doing a drop-in method, you're going to sew the bottom edge here as well. So this will all be sewn all the way across You don't need to leave this unsewn. Once you have that sewn, you'll then box your corners. And if you fast forward to the end of this video where I'm constructing the end of the bag after I birth it, you'll see how I box corners. But what you do is you just pull the corners like this, line up your seams. So make one seam go to the left, one seam to the right, sew across this, do that on both sides, then you'll trim the seam allowance down. And then you'll continue on with the drop-in lining, and the drop-in lining method is what you've seen me do in other patterns or other tutorials, where you fold this top edge down all the way around using double-sided tape on both your lining and exterior to the line that's given in the pattern. You'll drop it in, use some double-sided tape again, line up the top edges, and then you'll sew, you'll top stitch all the way around. I hope that makes sense. But I do have another video, I'll find it and I'll post it in the comments below for how I do a drop-in lining, and you'll be able to refer to that to see how I do it. So you'll go to the end of that video where I'm constructing the bag, and you'll be able to see how the drop-in lining is done so that you can refer to that if you need a little bit of extra help. But for this one, because I'm doing the drop-in or the birthing method, I do not stitch the bottom of my bag. So now what I need to do is open up my zipper, open up my zipper pocket as well, so make sure everything is open nice and wide. You don't want anything closed. And then what you do is you place the lining inside the bag. So we turn the lining so it is right sides out. We're placing it inside the bag. And I know that zipper is here, so it's going to make it feel a little bit wonky because it's kind of holding it so that it makes it a little bit harder. But it's not impossible. I'm going to stitch this seam open just to help hold it open. So I'm just stitching that seam open just to keep it open. And I'm just basting it at the top, not near anywhere where it's going to be seen in the seam after when the bag is done. So it's just basted at the top. Now we're going to push our handles down inside the bag just like that. And we want the zipper pocket to be on the same side as the exterior zipper pocket. So here's my exterior zipper pocket. I'm putting the zipper pocket on the same side. Now we need to pin this all the way around. And to do that, you're going to line up your center marks on your top exterior band with your center marks on your exterior. So line up all those center marks, and I usually get a better view if I stand. So I'm just standing to be able to get more of a bird's eye view here. So center mark on the top interior band with the center mark on the exterior. Add a few clips. Now this is where it's going to feel a bit wonky because you have that zipper tail here that's kind of fighting you and not wanting you to push this. But you're going to line up this side seam on your lining with the side middle mark, center mark on your side panel. And again, that zipper is going to kind of fight you because it's there closing up the bag. Again, side seam on the lining with the side center mark. And then we're going to clip it the rest of the way around. And because I have those seams all pressed open and stitched open, I don't have to worry about making sure that they're staying open because they are staying open due to how I stitched them and how I added the double-sided tape to the exterior ones. And I'm giving extra clips around here where the zipper tab is because the zipper kind of holds the bag from opening wider. Normally if there's a zipper tail you can get it open really wide. This pattern, the way it's designed, doesn't have that zipper tail, so you're having a bit of a tighter fit here. But again, it's not impossible. As you just saw, I use a few more clips. We'll push this down like this when we sew, and that'll keep it flat, as you can see. So it's really easy. You just have to work with the material. Again, adding those clips just like that. Now we're going to stitch the bag, can't see, stitch the bag all the way around using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And if you have an extension table, now is a good time to use it, unless you have a free arm and you want to use your free arm to be able to stitch all the way around the bag. Oh. So here we go. I'm going to stitch all around my bag. Again, make sure you're using the stitch length you use for stitching your bag together. And I try to have this so that you can see what I'm doing, but I know it's not really easy. But I'm just stitching all the way around using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And I'm just making sure that even though I pressed those seams open, that everything is staying open and flat. And again, handles are pushed down into the bag. You shouldn't be stitching under anything except for the exterior and interior top band. Now I'm coming up to that area where the zipper tab is, but because I've clipped lots of clips, it's super easy. I'm keeping everything nice and flat. No issues here. It went really easy. Really easy, as you just saw. Now I'm just going to put these clips out of the way. Sorry if that's loud. All right, so now we have that all pushed out of the way. Now, if your domestic machine can't handle bulk, you may want to trim your seam allowance. I'm going to leave it. My machine is usually okay with the bulk. Now we need to turn the bag right sides out. So you want to bring the lining over the exterior. And this is the one part that may be a little bit tricky for you. You're just revealing the top edge. You're not bringing it right sides out completely. You're just turning your lining right sides out. I gotta make sure this pocket is down, because right now it's sticking up. And again, where that zipper is, it's going to kind of pinch all your materials in. Just keep maneuvering everything until you have your top edge exposed. Roll it with your fingers to get it nice and flat. Keep your handles down inside the bag. So I'm going to add some clips around the top edge of the bag, just because where this zipper is, again, it's kind of pulling on that material. So adding these clips is going to help keep everything together, and when I go to top stitch, it'll look beautiful. So I'm just rolling it with my fingers because I can't press with my iron because it's vinyl on both sides. But if you're using a quilting cotton or canvas or something that you can press, you can definitely take this to your iron and give it a really good press. And there we go. And I paid special attention to the edge here where the zipper tab is, because as you can see, it squishes it in. But again, I've maneuvered the fabrics so that everything is nice and smooth here, and I won't have any issues when I'm top stitching. So again, I'm going to bring back my extension table. I'm going to increase my stitch length to my favorite top stitch length, and I'm going to leave long thread tails. Now, if you want, you could backstitch here if you want, if you don't want to have to worry about threading your threads through in the end, if you're just finding that it's easier for your hands. Normally I would just do that because my hands can't always handle the needle, but for the tutorial I really want to have it the way it's given in the pattern, so I'm going to do that. So what we're going to do is start at one of the side seams. So I'm actually going to start over where there's all this area here that's squished together, just to sort of get that over and done with. And you know what? No, I'm not. I'm going to start on the seam over here. Side seam. Oops, where'd that go? That way there I'm already started, and when I get to that area, it's going to be a little bit easier on me. So no back stitching. And I know it's hard to see what I'm doing because you've got the bag in the way, but I'm putting it under my presser foot. I pushed my needle down right now, and the bag is all pushed down, and I'm just going to start top stitching around, no back stitching. And I remove my clips as I get to them. Take your time. And this will be the same thing if you're doing drop-in lining. Right now your two pieces will be attached together, and you'll just stitch all the way around your bag, except for you may not have as hard of a time because it's going to be turned the right way and your lining won't be pulling where that zipper is, the zipper tab. But I wanted you to see that this is really doable. You just have to take your time, as you can see like I'm doing here. Make sure your hardware is out of the way when you're approaching around the side panel. Oops. And I'm around that side edge right now. I just got through it. No issues there. I just took my time going around. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. There's my threads. I want to make sure that I don't run them over. And you see, I'm not afraid to squish this bag all up because I'm going to take it after we're all done, and I'm going to go inside with my small iron and give everything a nice press again. Stopping in the same hole I started in, lift my needle, pull my thread so I have long thread tails. Remove my extension table. Now I need to grab a needle because we're going to sew this or stitch this through the seams. So grab my needle and grab your two threads, and what you're going to do is with your two threads, and I like to cut them so they're the same length again. So there's one and there's the other two. So have them all the same length, and you're going to pull it through the seam and then come up through the top seam here. So you're going to go in through where your stitching is and come out through the top. So we're going to go in through the stitching here and come out through the top seam there. And because I'm not very strong with my hands, I use my pliers to help grab my needle, just like that. So there's one side through. Now I'm going to do the same for the other side. So put them together. Thread the needle. Thread it through, up, coming up through that seam, between the seam where the exterior and lining are. And now they're up through this seam here where the exterior and lining are. Now I'm going to knot the threads. I'm going to tie it a few times just to ensure that it is really tight. And then what we're going to do is pull these threads now through to the lining side. So we're going to bring it through to the exterior and lining so it goes between the two. So I'm just going to pull my bag back a bit so I can, ow, I just elbowed my machine. Pulling my bag back a bit so I can see where the exterior and lining is. Thread the needle again. So you're putting 4 threads through the eye of your needle. And then go back through that seam, coming out through the exterior and lining. And this is where it's a bit tricky because I can't see. So there's my needle coming out through my exterior and my lining. So I'm just going to pull it. And you see how my threads are here between the exterior and the lining? Now I'm just going to tie another knot. Now you can bring it down and come through the lining instead and come out through the lining and then trim it. But I just like this because I can tie another knot here and really secure it in place. And you can do this method on any bag that you make where you don't want your top stitching to have back stitching, or anywhere that you don't want back stitching. Same thing, pull it through, like even like what we did on the overlay. We've pulled it through to the back and tied it off. And I'm not going to be concerned about those threads because they're going to be hidden within the bag. There we go. So see, we have no back stitching, we just have this beautiful bag at the top. Now we need to turn the bag right sides out, so give it a push through to the exterior so that it can come out. So bring your handles out. And that Decoville heavy makes it a little bit hard. Also the vinyl I used and the faux leather. Get all your edges pushed out nicely. If there is somewhere where you see that it looks like it's a little bit wonky, like I see right here, it looks like I could re-stitch that area. I'm just going to pull that out of the bag, that little area. I'm going to mark it so I know where it is first, because I'm pulling on it, I'm not going to see. And I want to re-stitch so that I'm just going to go over it so that it's kind of a nicer curve there, because right now the curve is kind of wonky in that area. So I know I'm kind of turning this back wrong sides out. Not all the way, I don't really need to go all the way. But I'm just going to look and see how my stitching looks here. I can't really tell where it is. I'm just going to push this back out. I'm just going to pause the camera and figure this out. You don't need to sit here and see me figure this out. And then we will come back and we will continue on with our bag. But all I'm doing right now is I'm just fixing that one area where it just seems like I'm not really happy with how it looks here. I want it more curved, not like it pops out a bit. So we'll go off, I'll fix that and come back. All right, so I fixed that little area that was kind of bothering me, that just wasn't super perfect, so I just restitched it. My bag is going to need a really good press when it's done to reattach some of my interfacings, but now I'm really happy with how it looks. So I've done the birthing method. If you did the drop-in lining, what you'll do, as I was mentioning earlier, is you'll have your bag, your lining dropped inside your bag, so your lining will be wrong sides together with your exterior. You'll place them wrong sides together. You'll have your top edge folded down using the seam allowance given in the pattern, so both exterior folded down and the lining folded down. Then you'll place your lining and you'll line up the lining top edge fold with the exterior top edge fold all the way around. You'll clip them together or use double-sided tape to hold it in place. Then you'll top stitch around the entire bag. Easy peasy. I'll find a tutorial, like I said earlier, and I'll link it below, and you'll just have to fast forward through till you get to the part where I'm doing the drop-in lining, just to give you a little visual help in case you are not really sure how to do a drop-in lining. And I also give some little extra tips and tricks usually in my tutorials too. So there may be a tip and trick in there that may help you as well. But the drop-in lining is really good for this bag, as mentioned above, because of this zipper tab here. It may make it a little bit easier to top stitch around, especially if you're making the small, because it could fight you a little bit. Now, as I mentioned, I did do the birth method, so we need to close this big opening that we have in the bottom of our bag. And to do that, we're going to pull the bottom of the bag out through our zipper pocket. So bring it out through the zipper pocket. Get everything all lined up, the bottom edge all lined up. And then what we'll do is we'll sew across the bottom using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So sew all the way across the bottom. And we're actually almost done, which is really exciting. This is the part that I get really excited about because there's not much left to do. It's just closing the opening, adding some rivets, attach our strap, and then we're good. So now that this is clipped, we're going to sew across the bottom using that seam allowance given in the pattern. So right here, sew across the bottom. Make sure you're only sewing the bottom lining. You don't want to be sewing anything else. Also ensure your stitch length is at the length you use for constructing a bag. And you know what's funny is I ran out of bobbin right at the end there. So I have another bobbin already filled. I just have to quickly change it. I was prepared. All right, so going back over just to make sure. Now we're going to take the corners and we're going to box them. So it may feel a little bit wonky because you've got this coming out of the bottom pocket, but it's you're not able to not do it. You can do it. Blah, that was another tongue twister. So press your seams so that they nest. So that means one goes to the left and one to the right. So line them up. So line up the bottom seam and the side seam. And then we're going to do that on the other side. So again, just pull on the sides here and that'll automatically make these seams line up here. So one's going to the right and one to the left. Clip it in place. Oops. And then we'll sew across this using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And you may have to maneuver your bag so that you can do this. Don't be afraid to. Again, make sure those seams stay pressed one to the left and one to the right. Now we're going to trim our seam allowances. This will help reduce the bulk in those corners. And I'm also going to trim my bottom seam allowance. I could have did it before I stitched the boxed corners, but I did it after. So I'm just careful when I'm snipping. I snip down towards the seam. Throw your pieces away and tuck this back into the bag. Get everything nice and flat inside. And it fits like a glove, like it's just the perfect bottom inside the bag. I'm trying to turn it so that you can see with the light. Oh, it's hard to see there. but it is the nicest fitting bottom. And I see some threads that I'm just trying to get rid of that are at the bottom of the bag here. They're just sort of in there, so you can remove any threads that you see. Now we need to close the opening in our pocket. Pull the pocket out, and you have those folds that you had originally done. So we're going to take that and clip it together all the way across, and then we'll stitch it. Now you can also slip stitch this with a needle and your hand. So just use your hand stitching and stitch it together. I'm just going to machine stitch this closed. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time with words all of a sudden. I think because I've spoken too much. Just trying to get everything lined up. My hands are starting to give out on me. Perfect timing because we are almost done. So just stitch across this using the seam allowance given in the pattern. I just stitch with the machine because I figure it's in the bottom of a pocket. No one's really going to look there or see there, and if they do, it's not too terrible. Also, this bag is for me. So I'm just pushing my pocket back in, which is fighting me. It doesn't want to go in for some reason. There we go. Get the corners pushed in. Now, as I mentioned, there's a lot of wrinkles right now. I'm going to take my small iron and go inside the bag, and I'm going to press with my small iron after. Now that we have that all done, now we need to add those rivets to the top of our bag. So where we punched these holes earlier, we're going to add those rivets where it is. So what you need to do is take your seam, your handle here, and place it up, and then what you'll do is you will take your pen and make a mark where that hole is so that you can punch that hole all the way through to the lining side, which you can actually see the hole here, so I don't even need to do that. I don't know why I was doing that. Silly me. So now I'm just going to take my rivet press. I'm going to flatten this, and just like this, what you'll do is move your handle out of the way, take your hole punch, however you use it, line up the hole punch with that hole, and going right back into that hole, and just press to create the hole all the way through to your lining. And you'll do that on all three handles, and then you'll add your rivets. Now, if you're using the top handle connectors, what you'll do is take the handle and you'll thread it through. So I'm just going to find a piece of vinyl. So you'll take the handle, say this is your handle, you'll thread it through the hardware, and then what you'll end up doing too is you'll add your strap end hardware to the end of your handle, then you'll make some marks and you'll attach them with rivets. So you can attach it with rivets, or you can sew it in place as well if you're not using rivets or you're not using the strap ends. And again, I'll link a bunch of tutorials at the bottom for how to make nicer strap ends and for how to use your zipper to get a zipper on your zipper pull, all sorts of helpful tutorials in the bottom. So I'm going to go punch the holes for these rivets. I'm going to add the rivets, then I'll come back and we will take a look at our finished bag. So I've added the rivets through my handles and going through the lining as well. So that's how it looks. Now, before we attach our strap, there's just one more thing I wanted to mention. If you're using the thumb lock or the lock that slips in, you'll want to add the other half of the lock to your flap right now. So at the bottom of your flap here, using your manufacturer's instructions. You don't want to forget to do that. That is very important. So you'll want to add that to the bottom here, and that way there you can just slip it in and your flap will lock the front of your bag. So again, install that half of the lock that is left to your flap. Once you have that installed, you can then attach your strap just like this. So attach your strap, and then you have your handles and your crossbody strap. And the nice thing about this strap is it can also be tightened as tight as it can go, and you can wear it as a shoulder bag too. You can take the strap off, tuck it inside your bag, and just carry it with the handles if you want. You just have a couple of options, which is really nice. So there it is. Our Elpis handbag is all complete. We're ready to take it out and show it off to the world. But before you do, don't forget to take lots of photos and share them on social media, including in the Facebook page, and also use the hashtags given in the pattern so we can easily all find your Elpis handbags and ooh and ah at them with you. I really do hope you enjoyed sewing along with me and maybe picked up a few tips and tricks along the way. Thank you for sewing with me. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.